If you're not speaking, it's always good to be on mute in case, in my example, I've got my dog sitting next to me on the couch. You can't see him. He's pretty quiet, but I like to stay on mute. And if anything happens where there's an interruption, that's totally fine. That's the beauty and magic of editing. But with all of that, does anyone in particular want to share an intro on your company? And that way I'll save you sort of for last in a lineup of introductions, and then we can segue into Alliance and what you all are doing with Alliance.
That'd be Tom or you, Lee.
That's Tom himself.
Tom is the guy.
All right.
Alliance practice.
Great.
Yeah.
So I'll kick off, inviting you all to share a little bit about yourself. Lee, how about we start with you, since you and I have that connection, and I can give a little intro, and then we'll move on to Bob. And then Tom, I'll have you introduce yourself and then invite you to share how you started the company and how all three of you built the company together, what your current work is around leadership. Does that sound like a good plan?
Sounds great.
Awesome. All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is a really special episode, partially because, Lee, I've known you for many years now. We actually met at a gym that I used to manage, and we both ended up in Georgia from Philadelphia. You've had a slightly different journey thereabouts, but it was really a real treat to reconnect with you in our home state now, and in different capacities over the years. You've been a great inspiration for me as a leader, and demoing how you practice that. You practice not just what you preach, but what you're helping others with. And you have a wonderful company that you've established and founded with our two other guests, Bob and Tom, who I'm really excited to hear from all three of you today. We don't typically have a group interview, so I'm excited to get some extra voices and learn from all of you. I know our audience as well. Let's start off, Lee, with you. I'd love to hear your journey and where you've been as a leader, where you're going as well, what you're working on currently.
Thank you for the invitation to share some of those things, Rebecca. My career trajectory really can be summarized mostly in a 2020 view. The first 20 years were in the corporate sector, and I really enjoyed being in there, the so-called for-profit sector, and most of that time, almost exclusively, was spent in the consumer product arena. And a lot of the specialty areas that I focused on was on product development, also on how do you link words and images together to help advance something meaningful. Then I had this wild shift that happened. I really had a tug after 20 years to jump into the faith-based sector, the nonprofit sector. And I didn't really quite know what to do with that, but I was so naive about that sector, Rebecca, that I didn't realize that 20 years of business skills and of experiences and all of problem solving and ideation, that those could be accelerants to help advance meaningful nonprofit work. And I've really felt privileged to be able to shift into that arena, and privileged to work with some incredible people who became mentors for me along the way. So after 20 years, that's the second 20-year part, 2020. And then since then, with these two gentlemen, Bob and Tom here, we really rallied together around a shared vision. But one of the parts of that shared vision is the privilege, absolute privilege it is to be able to speak with leaders. Sometimes they're stuck. Sometimes they're looking for a safe place to process. Sometimes they're looking for insights and guidance where they're not fearful of being oversold by someone who might come in and say you have Rembrandts in the attic or whatever it might be. And so thoroughly enjoy the privilege it is to come along beside and serve, literally, great leaders who are growing, and just love it, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. I love that. And your nonprofit background alongside my own, that's one of the areas we connected on. And I love talking about alignment. I know we'll get into a little bit of that. Bob, would you please share your journey with us and what your trajectory has been so far?
Yeah, sure. And I want to join Lee and Tom in thanking you, Rebecca. This is a great opportunity to have this conversation with you. So thank you for the invitation. And my background, I started off in journalism. That was where my training was, and was in newspaper work for a season of time, and found out you can't really make a living in that lane. So anyway, broadened into launching a small publishing company, working in the public relations and advertising domain for a time, but then really pivoted into organizational management, also in the not-for-profit sector. I worked in a national voluntary health agency, the American Diabetes Association, for a number of years, and then pivoted into another international organization that does work in support of churches and Christian organizations around the world, and really spent 23 years in that organization, and that's where I sort of completed that segment of my career, and now pivoted into this new season, which has been incredibly invigorating for the three of us, and we're excited to talk to you about that. But it's been an amazing opportunity to sort of dip back into the kind of the buckets of experience, and perhaps find ways to help others who are on the path and looking for ways to build their businesses, and particularly scale their businesses to advance social good. So really, we're excited about what we're building now.
That's a wonderful background and a really great mission, Bob, that hopefully all of our audience can get behind. So I know we want to hear more about that. Before you share your company and what you folks are working on as a unit, Tom, please go ahead and share your background with us as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I'll just echo what Lee and Bob have already said. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and the folks that follow you and listen and learn from you. It's funny, Lee said he was 2020. Well, I'll go to three. So let's put it that way. At 45 years of nonprofit experience with three organizations: the American Cancer Society, 20 years with the American Diabetes Association, where I left as the chief field officer. And then the last 17 years, I was CEO of an organization called Creating Healthier Communities, which actually represents over 5,000 nonprofits in the United States, almost all of them health and wellness, chronic disease, mental health organizations. So that's pretty much as fast as I can put it, my background in leadership over that period of time. And I know we'll talk later about it. I just had a great opportunity to learn from some of the best in nonprofit. I mean, I look back over the years, the folks that I've known, the Dr. Seffrin from the American Cancer Society, Cass Wheeler from American Diabetes, my own boss for many years, John Graham with the American Diabetes Associations. These were men and women that actually built nonprofit and built health in America. So was really honored and privileged to learn from them.
That is so inspiring. And now the three of you are working together for Alliance Practice. Tell us, what is it that brought you all together? What was the inspiration and the vision? And what are you all currently working on now?
Well, maybe I'll kick that off and then go to my partners here. As I told you, my career, when I retired, or at least thought I was retiring about 2 years ago from Creating Healthier Communities, over the last several years, working with, again, nonprofits across the United States and many international nonprofits, I became convinced that some of our communities simply were not becoming healthier. In other words, there had to be reasons why, after so many years, you could go in certain zip codes in our cities and people were just as sick and just as unhealthy as they were 25 years ago. Well, that all really forms into a science called social determinants of health. In other words, where you live, where you work, how you were raised, your parents, your family structure, the culture, the schools you went to has an awful lot to determine your long-term ability to stay healthy. But over those last few years, I began to discover that many of the inequities in our societies and health disparities, beyond social determinants of health, there was something even more fundamental, and that was trauma. Mostly adverse childhood experience trauma. And so I really became drawn to that. And when I retired, I've known Bob and Lee and Bob in particular for well over 30 years. These were two gentlemen that actually were practicing trauma-informed care for over a decade in their organization. So bottom line, we all decided that we didn't really want to stop working, that we had a lot to offer other folks, and that we wanted to start a practice that was solely dedicated to working with organizations who are focused on trauma informed care. And that's kind of where we started with the Alliance practice. And Lee and Bob can take it from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I'll jump back in. Thank you for that good question, Rebecca. In my almost or right at 20 years of experience with Hallmark, different parts of the Hallmark company, their big organization, and then later with another 20 years with a significant faith-based nonprofit. One of the things that I learned about myself, because you need to know yourself well, honestly, in the middle of this, is the privilege of being able to work closely with a team, small team even, that you where you respect each individual so much, and you know that you are rallied around the same purposes. Absolutely, it's still work, but it is a joy to be able to do that. And so, you know, trying to figure out what to do. Didn't envision like a conventional retirement thing. It just seems incredibly boring to me, and still have gas in the tank. And I thought, what in the world might I do? And then thankful that we came along, because I do think that we have been privileged, and I hope we continue to be privileged to find those opportunities to share some of those insights, and some of it from scar tissue, some of it from great things that have happened, and to roll it forward. And also, I think to a person, we love the reality that you have to continue learning in order to continue serving. And that also is one of the great benefits for what we're doing.
That is a wonderful reminder for all of us, Lee. And you mentioned serving. So it sounds like you all have some, perhaps, I don't want to assume, but an understanding of servant leadership tied to not only the work that you're doing, but also your leadership together as a company and as three individual leaders in your own right. You have all wonderful wealth of experience and knowledge and expertise to bring. So when it comes to leading a company and working with your clients, what is your leadership dynamic with each other and working alongside the clients that you're serving?
I'll start, but then Tom, I'm going to hand this one to you early on, Rebecca, because the three of us, although we've known each other for a long time, but to be in a conference call with a client, it took us a while to figure out who was going to speak. It was just like trying to figure out, is there a rhythm to this? And so it was really kind of fun to watch, but we finally figured that out. So Tom, with that in mind, or Bob, jump in.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I can tell you that one thing that is part of our foundation is deep relationship among us outside of business. We can't tell you all the details of what happened on some of these weekend experiences that we had, but we had some deep times of communication and sharing and prayer and talking about our families and concern for each other. So we had developed a deep care, concern, love for each other as brothers, as Jesus followers, as business leaders who were, sharing our life together. And so every once or twice a year, we'd have kind of a long weekend that we'd get together out in the woods and have a fire, and there were things communicated around that fire that we just can't report to you, Rebecca, or anybody else. What happened there stays there. But the result of that was a deep bond of friendship and commitment to each other. So I think to your point, we don't just come together as with shared kind of business experience and maybe a degree of expertise, but we come together as deep friends and deeply committed to each other. And I would trust my life and my family with these two brothers, and I would also trust a business leader that I was coaching with the expertise that these two bring to the table. So it is a bit of a lovely blend of both deep friendship and commitment to each other, and motivation to serve each other as well as serve others alongside of each other.
That sounds like a wonderful foundation, bedrock for what you're building, and very healthy. Obviously, don't share your personal conversations, but knowing that you have the ability to speak to each other with love and kindness as leaders and come together and pursue the same goals and mission and stay aligned. Well, that's sort of what we've talked about, Lee, in terms of alignment and helping businesses align. And that's what you're currently doing with your clients as well. So it makes sense that the three of you would practice what you're preaching there and follow that same kind of understanding that you have to be a strong unit and team working together. So, how do we take that to our clients, whether it's internal in our team or external? I feel like one of the conversations that I have with other leaders and doesn't get touched on enough is that understanding of alignment. We talk a lot about self awareness. Alignment to me sounds like we need to have not just an awareness of self, but an awareness of the rest of the people on our team or the clients that we're working with and their team members, and making sure we understand where everybody is at any given time so that we can focus in on where we're all trying to go together. Perhaps that's a very simplistic way of approaching it. How do you all describe that, and how do you work with clients to build that alignment?
Well, I will add a quick comment, and then Tom, I know that you're ready to jump on this one, but I'm going to go to sort of a relentlessly pragmatic aspect of alignment, Rebecca, in that it's sort of some fundamental, just basic things. But the most important thing you'll ever do as a leader is decide who you select to add to your team, hiring, or who you decide to partner with. Alignment, real alignment, is an accelerant. Misalignment will slow things down, and it adds, sort of like, why are things so hard to get to? But anything that is sideways energy like that can really slow down progress. And, maybe one of the harder consequences of that is it actually begins to erode morale. Focusing on that tight buy-in, alignment, trusting alignment is a beautiful thing. Tom?
No, I think hit it. And Rebecca, I appreciate the question, especially as you said, how do we focus on, you know, bringing what gifts God has given us, the experience that we've had, both good and bad. I mean, let's face it, you take the three of us and add up the years. I don't want to put it in numerical because we'll shock some people, but there's been a lot of learning. So, two things I would say, and you've already heard it a couple of times. At this stage of our lives and our career, what we want to do is come along other leaders, not organizations. We're not looking, and we don't even use the term sometimes clients, although that's what they are. These are individuals mostly in leadership positions, which, as you know, can be very lonely at times. Three of us want to pour into that leader everything that we've learned, come alongside of them, and that starts with deeply listening to them, really seeking to understand exactly who they are, where they come from, what their mission is, and then opening up to them that the keys to success in many cases, which is why we chose the name, all of us have been successful at building strategic alliances over all of our careers. It's bringing people together, as Lee said, around a common vision, a common mission, but understanding what strengths and weaknesses, what resources are there. Early on, we like to use a lot of metaphors as we meet every week and talk among ourselves. But early on, we had a metaphor of that if studying Cervantes and literature of Don Quixote, and there's that poignant part of the book where Don Quixote is out tilting at windmills, right? And that's the thing we dedicated ourselves to, that we wanted to help other leaders not tilt at windmills, because they're, not to jump for this opportunity, not to look at that glittering, bauble that's there and say that's the solution, but to help them take the time and the discipline through good business process to actually be more effective. Many times we like to think of ourselves not as Don Quixote, but maybe close to it, somebody helping others not waste their time and precious resources and focus on that.
That's really
And again, I'll just say too, real quick, because Bob can speak to this. In doing that, that's not a soft science. It's hard discipline. It is real business process. And the king in our team of business process is Bob, because every time even we begin to stray, he comes back to what is our plan? What is our business process? What is the discipline that we're following?
Then my next question is for Bob. I was going to say, Tom, that's really admirable because I have certainly seen it, and I've definitely been affected by what I think you're describing as the shiny object syndrome. If you're working remote and you're in my capacity in marketing and operations, for example, you're constantly bombarded by AI and automations and changes. And so it can be very hard to lose your focus, and that distraction can be maybe packaged in a way that seems like it's going to help you reach your goals faster. However, from what it sounds like, and what I think resonates with me too, is that understanding that it takes time and discipline and being able to sort of have those blinders on, if you will, and focus in on what you need to do to accomplish those goals. But I'm again applying very simplistic terms. So, Bob, share with us first, how do you identify what the actual challenge is for that leader? I'm sure there might be some commonalities and there are obviously variables in that, but do you ever find common themes that every leader is struggling with? And then how do you like to approach it to help them keep that focus?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rebecca. And by the way, unfortunately, or the challenge will be that with the advent of AI and the speed of business innovation, this challenge that you're describing is only going to get worse. I mean, the shiny objects are going to be coming faster. They're going to look even more appealing, and it's going to be even more distracting. So part of our discipline is also to just sort of kind of everybody take a deep breath, take a half step back, and let's just take a look at the whole picture. And we have a discipline framework that really we just sat with a whiteboard and scribbled it based on our experience. We outlined what we believe leaders need to keep their eye on in terms of the fundamentals of any business. And it's not that this is so mystical or magical. It's what you would learn in business school, but it's sort of we added some pragmatic perspective to it. But we've organized what we call our 4x4 domains of organizational health, meaning that 4 major domains being spreading from a planning domain, making sure you're clear on your strategy and your path forward. Your organizing domain, which by the way isn't a shiny object. It's not exciting to anybody. Well, that's not true. There are some people that get excited about this part, but Lee and Tom don't get excited about it. So I have to say, no, this matters. We've got to make sure the organization is clean and clear, and everybody's understands the systems and the processes. And then a people domain, your staff, and in some organizations, your volunteers, and very, very importantly, your partners. And then your what we would call your controlling domain. That's the financial management, basically, and just the outcomes measurement and so forth. So in our view, so each of those 4 domains has 4 subdomains. So it's a very clear, disciplined grid that we will take every one of our organizations through, every one of our clients through, and we will rate them. And we keep it pretty simple, and we'll apply a red, yellow, green sort of assessment. And our goal is to get an organization to an 80% level of readiness for their next stage. Whether they're launching, we're going to say when you get to 80%, by the way, this side of heaven, there's not an organization that's going to get to 100%. So 80% actually is our target, knowing that there's always some softness and some movement, and you're building things and working on things. But we want to make sure that you're not at 40% readiness, because in that case we have to say, slow down, fix these domains, straighten these things out, and we would develop a plan to do that with that diagnostic guiding us. So that would be a part of our methodology to help avoid the shiny coin syndrome, the squirrel, following the squirrel across your vision and chasing in another direction. So this keeps people focused.
That's great, Bob. And I appreciate you sharing that it's pretty foundational to business. You don't have to look for anything perhaps novel or new. It's really about having the basics. It's like, this is a football, right? The famous,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? You have to.
Yeah. Thank you for calling Vince Lombardi into the conversation here. Yes, absolutely. Exactly like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you're right too, speaking back to what you're saying about AI, it is only going to get worse. And so there are some real benefits to having a solid foundation in business and understanding that, and then being able to apply what you need. I like to share that you should not automate what you don't know. And I think the same thing applies to AI too. So it sounds like you have a really strong framework that is simple in the beneficial sense that it's not overly complicated. I like to think of things when you're growing as, especially scaling, that your systems need to be simpler as you scale to avoid additional confusion and complexity. So I'm curious, what area of those four do you find that leaders need the most help with or struggle the most with? And maybe there isn't one particular area, but I'm curious if you've noticed a pattern there.
Yeah, we'll all start and my partners can supplement. But yes, first of all, we love all of our domains equally. They are all critical. And if you start emphasizing one over another, that's a risk because you end up it's like a car having four tires that are all inflated to equal pressure. If one is not inflated at the proper pressure, you can still drive down the highway, but it might not be as smooth. So we want all the domains operating at an acceptable level. But having said that, there are a couple of domains that we think are challenging right now. On the planning side, anticipating the demands that AI are introducing to businesses are so pervasive and so they are affecting every organization, every business, both on the positive side in terms of opportunities to leverage and the challenging side of creating different kinds of competition that you might not have had to worry about previously or other challenges. So it's a disruptor in so many domains that this is affecting everyone's strategy and plans, and everyone's having to kind of revisit. And if any one of your listeners is not, then our first piece of advice is take a look at AI and assess how it's going to impact your business. And another domain would fall that I would call attention to is in the broader relationship with other organizations, the partnership arena. Because one of the points of emphasis of our launch of the Alliance practice, you can tell by our name, is that we feel that one of the critical success factors for organizations going forward is to recognize that really the ones making decisions about either investing or consuming a product from your business or serving the market in the same way that you want to, they're going to be better partners than competitors. And it's better for you to invest in finding ways to build relationships with them, collaboration with them, find ways for them to supplement some of maybe the weaknesses that you have, and present to decision makers out there, investors or funders, etc., a united front. And we're convinced that collective action is the pathway to more substantive movement in terms of social progress on a number of different fronts. So I would point to those two domains: a strategy domain over on the planning side and a partnership domain in organization side.
And I think as Bob has said that, and he said it well, and I know we were kind of smiling about it, but actually the four domains have to be looked at concurrently. And that's one of the problems with leadership, right? Whether you're in marketing or finance or whatever you're doing, is this if we hadn't found the name Alliance Practice, it would be Balance Practice, because really what we're trying to do, and this has been a transition, Rebecca, because all of us have been in leadership position. Two of us have been CEOs for a number of years. So we had to transition ourselves from the ones making the fixes to the ones having people slow down a little bit, as Bob said, and allow others to have input before rushing to the fix. So part of our job, and this has a lot to do with all the four domains, is simply helping leaders navigate mission drift when there are so many multiple stakeholders. Okay, and one of them can be technology or AI, but watching them listen to all the, sometimes dissident voices that are out among them, their boards, their other staff, the customers, the clientele, and helping them listen to that, process that, evaluate that, but stay focused on the mission. Because as you know, and you're the reason you're doing this podcast, there's 1.5 million nonprofits in this country. I won't tell you the percentage, although I've worked many, many years with many of them. Very few of them stay very true to their mission and stay focused on it. And one other quick thing I'll add into that I think we've learned and where we help people is again, gets back to balance. Leaders themselves will be very good at, you can ask any leader, and what's your Myers-Briggs, or what's your strength indicators, and they'll say it. Having them understand that those strengths are there for a reason, but if you overdo them, they become your primary weakness. So as that constant coaching and coming alongside saying, yeah, you're confident, that's good. Too much confidence becomes arrogance. Too much humility ends up paralysis, no decision. So it's us helping them stay balanced, and then you said it earlier too, and self-aware of themselves and where they're at, their own well-being, their own mental well-being, where they are.
Yeah.
Tom, two things you just shared. The one resonates a lot, that our strengths can be our weaknesses. And that's something that I've definitely been mindful of. Never talked about on this podcast, but I think it definitely deserves that extra attention, because we could be off balance, off kilter, and veer too far into that strength that it goes beyond what is helpful and valuable for other people. So I'm glad you draw attention to that. And then the other thing that you mentioned, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say really quick, and the funny thing is, it never stops. The three of us have very different skill sets. And it's not that we're just talking to other folks in our own time of planning, especially with these two. It's we have to watch ourselves and be able to say, maybe you're going too far in this direction, or maybe you should be more dominant, more assertive in this area. So that's the part. And again, Bob alluded to it, but it's picking the right team. When we came together and God brought us together, it is actually for our own good, because iron does sharpen iron, and we help each other become better at what we're doing so we can equip leaders to be better at what they're doing.
I love that. Amen to that. And again, that goes back to not just that self-awareness, but then awareness of your team too. And I will not feign the same experience level with nonprofits at all. I will say that I have had a decent share of experience and been in several board meetings, even serving on a nonprofit board, and experiencing exactly what you're all describing, where there's that misalignment and the imbalance in those domains, and the getting that experience and being in the moment, you don't always see clearly. And so that's why the folks that you're working with, I'm sure, definitely value and appreciate the work you're doing with them, because it can be very hard when you're in it to be able to step back and slow down, as you shared, and see where exactly they might be in their planning and strategy and where the organization is moving towards. Lee, do you have any additional thoughts you
Yeah,
want to share
just
on any or all of that?
quickly, every leader that we have been privileged to help support, and every leader that I know in any sector, they are usually so caught up in the churn and the swirl of every single day. And many of them, they really don't have much in the way of reserve coping sort of capacity, because they are so tapped out. And a tired leader, an overextended leader, and I've spent years doing that, and I know that these guys have as well. And maybe you know something about this, Rebecca, but we end up kind of defaulting at some levels to the realm of hopeful assumption, where you kind of are holding on to a hope that some things will take place that you may not feel like you can fully wrap your arms around. And so one of the things I think that we do, and I hope that we continue to do, is to help these leaders get a really clear grasp, and this is in part due to sort of the process that we have, on their readiness to implement or their readiness to scale. And then there's a subpart of that, really, which is, do they have the available capacity, bandwidth, in order to really go down that path? So in some cases, and we've talked about stepping back a little bit or helping a leader kind of step back and get the full view. Sometimes that does include some encouragement to go. Now's the time to go. And other times it's like, this is the time to exercise a little strategic patience, which is even kind of harder to suggest sometimes, but it really can help.
Ask you, Lee, because I think you mentioned scaling a few times in this conversation, and I wanted to define what that means. And my reasoning for that is that I feel like we're bombarded, or at least my feed on Instagram and other social channels is bombarded with this idea that every business needs to scale, can scale. In fact, you can scale overnight. Surprise, surprise. I do not believe that that's true. And I also see from an operations business point of view that there's one definition of scaling. And then I also see from a more narrow marketing understanding that there are ways to scale a brand. And that is not technically the same definition, at least from my experience and point of view. So I would love it. Can you share what scaling for, especially for a nonprofit, but what is that definition so that we're all on the same page and
I
aligned on
love
that?
the notion of being able to scale dramatically overnight, Rebecca. I also would love the notion of growing a full head of hair overnight. I don't think either of those is very at least realistic. So scaling can often mean where you know that you haven't fully realized the full extent of what your market could be. And you know that you're being maybe held up from some processes or whatever it might be, whatever that could be. So some of the scaling is actually moving in a way that helps you bring more of your audience together, your customer base together, in order to really more fully serve the sector that you have, that you're serving in. In other cases, and this would be a bad example, is sometimes scaling for the sake of scaling isn't automatically a good thing. Sometimes the bigger opportunity is to work first towards sustainability, which is huge, because if you cannot sustain where you are, you really, it'd be a rough place to try to scale from that, because you may not have enough momentum, you may not have enough capacity, and a whole host of other things. So scaling is usually good, but it's always best if you can do it in a way that also builds in with it the sustainability as you grow, right? Tom, you may want to jump on that one.
Well, no, I think you said it well, but yeah, I think, Rebecca, it's something that we end up talking almost the majority of our time with clients is what Lee said, sustainability. There's no question, there's no shortage of passion. There's no shortage of vision. It's in some organizations and compassion. But it goes back to what Bob said, where what we come in with, and it is, you're right. It's sometimes not always the most fun exercise, but it is the most productive, is to make sure that you marry that passion and that mission focus with a solid business functionality. There are things that have to happen. There are processes that you need to go through, and it generally does lean into discipline, right? But if you can do that and stay true to that and not rush or panic, or again, as you said, dream about magical thinking that everything is going to change. The money's going to come in somehow, and this product is going to go to market somehow, or you're making statements about, yes, everybody in the world's going to come to us. If you can do that, you become sustainable. When you become sustainable, you look for other partners who are also sustainable. And then you start to see system change and you start to need progress.
I love that. And I love how you both explain that. And I'm curious, Bob, from a systems point of view and thinking strategically about helping leaders have stronger systems, especially based on those 4 domains. Do you have any thoughts around scaling and what that can mean from that particular perspective?
Yeah, first of all, I'm really mad at Lee now that I've heard your comments, because you came up with this great idea about promising to scale overnight. And Lee hasn't once recommended that. He's our marketing guru for the Alliance practice.
Yeah.
He never once recommended that. And Lee, I think it resonates though. It's got a ring to it. So anyway, I'm upset with Lee for not coming up with that. But having said that, we think scaling now. Just I'm being a little bit dramatic here, but scaling is sort of the last thing to worry about. It's the last thing for a business to worry about. And if you're oriented too much too soon towards scaling, then there's a high risk that you're going to get out ahead of yourself and maybe lose the plot, as they say. Anyway, our emphasis is, as these others, as Lee and Tom have both emphasized, our emphasis is the fundamental disciplines that lead to sustainability. And scaling emerges as a fruit from that discipline. It's not the target. You don't plant an apple tree and say, I want to go harvest apples. You plant an apple tree and you cultivate it and you nourish it and you make sure you're pruning it properly and that it's growing and flourishing and that fruit comes. So scaling is fruit, and everyone wants to scale. I mean, it's a natural orientation, but the fundamentals of making sure that your domains are healthy and in place might not be the exciting part of, oh no, that's I want to be getting attention for all that I'm doing right now, but over the course of time, those are going to be the winners in terms of real impact in the marketplace. Those that pay attention to the disciplines of good management.
And one thing, Rebecca, let me just add on to that because we've talked a lot about, again, what we do with clients. You mentioned earlier, and we've mentioned about working with each other, assembling a good team. A lot of the time that we spend with nonprofit leaders, here's another word that's not exactly, titillating to everybody, is good governance. The best way not to end up getting lost, as you said, with all, the forest through the trees, is to surround yourself with a board of directors, an advisory board, whatever you want to call it. Those volunteers, we see probably the greatest weakness in nonprofits in this country. You can almost divide those with good governance generally succeed. Those with poor governance end up having just all kinds of problems. And it usually emanates from the fact that we, by our natures, will tend to pick people that think like us, that like the things that we like. So if you're really dedicated to those shiny things and at scaling, the first instinct is to get a bunch of people together that agree with you. One book that had enormous influence on me years ago was written by Doris Kearns called Team of Rivals. And it was the brilliance of Abraham Lincoln assembling a cabinet, literally, of people that thought differently, that opposed some of his ideas, that came at it with a different skill set. But there was such a brilliance in that, what Lincoln did, and it always sticks in me to be able to encourage other nonprofit leaders. Don't be afraid to recruit people with different skill sets, even in fact if they challenge you, even if in fact sometimes they threaten you. Those voices, those different expertise are the best strength that you can bring to your mission because they'll make sure that you don't run too far off the path.
I love that, Tom. I have a follow-up question too. Before I ask it, I do want to highlight, Bob, something that you said that resonates about scaling is that it should not be the end goal. And I think that has not been shared enough, at least not in the spaces that I frequent online and have discussions, that if that is the end goal, then we really aren't producing anything of value for other people. Actually sounds self-serving. So I like that you highlight that. Hopefully I just summarized it and did that justice, that thought justice. And Tom, something that you're sharing, good governance. I have been in several board meetings where maybe everybody is agreeing to get to whatever the end goal of that meeting is, or to get out of the meeting faster. Or maybe everybody is all disagreeing and not in a healthy way. I love the idea of challenging each other and being able to ask the deep, harder questions so that we can align on our mission and work towards our mission. Sometimes I'm sure it could be a little bit messy here and there, but what would you say are the great characteristics of governance and leaders that are all coming together for those purposes, in addition to making sure that you're filling in complementary skill sets?
I think looking for people, actually, some of it is the complementary, looking at skill sets, but looking at it through a different lens in the sense of being very intentional. In other words, we talked a lot. You've heard us already talk about business process and discipline. Good governance is a discipline. It is a business process. It does not happen naturally. It will not happen naturally. And it is you sitting down looking at, I have a mission. To accomplish that mission, what skills, expertise, what types of character do I need to be able to inform me to make the best decisions to accomplish that mission? And then it's sitting down literally. Some of the tools we use, not uncommon, are grids, working with leaders to say, you have 3 people with marketing background. You have nobody with technology background. You have no one that's actually led from a business. You have no one who really represents a patient segment or an advocacy. So I think, again, what you look for, again, isn't magic. It's work. It's looking for diversity in the true definition of diversity and of inclusion. And that means people from different skill sets, different backgrounds, different cultures, and you bring them in, but you make sure that when you bring them in, you provide them with the tools they need to succeed. That's a good orientation. That's making sure they understand the organization and that you're authentic and you're transparent with them about the strengths and weaknesses. Then you got a better chance of succeeding.
I love that, Tom, and I hope that our audience hears that and takes it to heart too, because that's a great guide for not only governance. I would also extend that to recruitment and recruiting for your company and making sure that, similar to what you were sharing, we're not getting folks who are very similar to us so that everybody is yes ending us, and that we are coming together, yeah, with that vibrance and that wonderful richness of different backgrounds and voices. So I absolutely love that. I'm curious, I know we're coming towards the end of our time. Do any of you, or maybe all of you, have an example of great leadership that you've seen, maybe in each other, or maybe within the organizations and the leaders you're helping, that has been the epitome, or at the very least, a really great example of what it can be or mean to be a great leader?
Well, I could look at these two gentlemen here on the this podcast with you, Rebecca, and highlight each of them as remarkable leaders. If I go back earlier in my career, I was with a large subsidiary of a major corporation that was bumping into some issues. And then there was a leadership change at the top. And being a younger professional, I didn't realize how important it was to make that shift at that time. But the new leader that came in, who had great experience, was a very discerning leader, began every single meeting, almost, it wasn't like reciting, but reminding everyone on the team of what we were focused on, what our priorities were, what our culture is, what our goals are, so that every meeting, literally, we always were linking back to where we were headed. And it had such a powerful effect to align the team, basically, and remind us of exactly where we were headed and how we would mark the progress towards that. So that was a really important leadership example for me.
That's a great practical example that anyone could take and start immediately with their teams. Thank you for sharing that, Lee. Bob, how about you?
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to go next, and just to build on what Lee's saying, yeah, it's going to sound like we're just celebrating each other, but I really mean this. In answer to your question, I've watched Lee lead in situations that have been inspiring to me, and there's a deep expertise in terms of marketing and the disciplines of deep listening that he's bringing to our team. So I really respect his leadership. And Tom, I've worked with even longer. And I literally worked for Tom. And so Tom has been a mentor to me. So much of what I learned, especially early on in terms of leadership, started with Tom. And I guess one highlight of that, we don't have time for a full case study, but
Please, no.
well, I mean, there's some stories we could tell, but one case study would be an interesting one, and that is his leadership of what's called now creating healthy communities. Creating healthy communities. He inherited an organization as the CEO that was a little, I don't know, Tom, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but a little tired and not gaining a great deal of momentum. And I watched him reposition that organization with some very effective selections in terms of team members, like we were talking about, and rebuilding a board with corporate leaders from around the country that were very, very strong and influential players. And I watched him discern enough of the way the wind was blowing in the culture to know how to get the organization aligned, to be not like lagging behind, but to recognize how to get the organization positioned to help lead the charge toward collective impact, toward local impact in cities where it's a very stubborn, these health crises in cities are very stubborn. And I watched him create a fresh expression of an organization and watch that turnaround happen. So that we have that case study in the back of our minds as alliance practice as well.
So I'll conclude with, and I know you're going to think this was scripted, Rebecca, but it wasn't. Because when you very first asked the question, I thought of Bob and Lee. And actually, we had a fourth brother that was with us for many of those years, doesn't work with us. But I'll just say it this way. I can divide your question into two ways. I mentioned earlier, I've been privileged and humbled to know some of the biggest names, some of the great leaders in and philanthropy in America, and continue to know some of them. I won't even mention names because I'll leave too many. So I've learned from them leading organizations and watch what they've done particularly well. All right, that's part of it. Most of us can learn that. You maybe can even get that from a webinar, a podcast, a book. What you can't get is that admonition of telling the truth with love. And if you want to be a great leader, and it's hard, is to find other people like these two who have exceptional talent, who have exceptional ability, but over all of it is this idea of humility and servant leadership. You could say in all of them, and I know Bob's talked about business process, and these are two men that practice empathy over efficiency. Because at the heart of our work, when we come together, we're concerned about real lives, real leaders, real people. And I've watched them and I learned from them. They're two of the brothers. And again, any leader should strive for this. And it can happen. You can surround yourself, again, with boards. I've had board chairmen over the years that continue to be very dear friends, and that's usually unusual. You find people that can tell you the truth when even you don't want to hear the truth. You find people to say gently but firmly, you're wrong, or you're not seeing this correctly. Wow. If you find that, your chances of being a good leader, a sustainable leader, and a good person have increased exponentially. So those have been the greatest, influences: empathy, telling the truth, authenticity, and integrity.
That is a beautiful way to wrap this episode, Tom. And everything the three of you shared, especially around leadership, has been really, really powerful. I hope that our audience takes that and can take the practical elements and start applying that in their own lives and work lives. Is there a way that folks can reach out to you directly? Would you like them to connect with you individually or as a group via the company? Because I know there are folks that can definitely benefit from the value and that truth and transparency that you have to share with them.
Lee, you must know where they can get a hold of us.
Tom, I'm pointing at you right now, friend. You could share that because Tom is our lead in terms of opening new conversations. And Tom, I really think you need to do this.
We have a website. The name of our practice is Alliance Practice. Pretty easy. It's not an overwhelming website. It really just focuses on us. There's some other people that we're bringing in working with us. So if they just Google Alliance Practice, these two gentlemen have much easier last names than I do. Although mine you won't forget, but you can find us on LinkedIn, find us at Alliance Practice. And I will just say, yeah, if there's anyone out there, honestly, I said we work with trauma organizations, but we also work in your city of Philadelphia. Bob has led us on efforts working with neighborhood coalitions in Southwest Philadelphia, working with local churches. We just want to, if there's a leader out there that says, whatever they heard today, that's something I can use, give us a call.
I love it. Well,
we will have a good conversation.
Definitely. And you all are definitely welcome back to have additional conversations. I know that we could continue on and on. I feel like I've learned so much already. This has been a masterclass in leadership. So I'll make sure that all three of your LinkedIns are linked below and the website so that people can find you and connect with you and hopefully reach out so that they can learn more and work with you. Thank you all three so much. And thank you for listening, audience, to another episode of Bad Bosses, Great Leaders, the podcast.